Good day, friends. Welcome to Gord's Poetry Show. Part 2 of number 78. Or no, that was number 77. This is 78. Part 2 of Falling into Winter. You can see I'm right on the ball today. We just had our first big snowfall. And, well, yes, shoveling ensued. And maybe somebody will write a poem about shoveling. Not really in the mood myself, but I am in the mood to read other people's poetry. And here's a new one, Natasha Ramoutar, Bittersweet, a new publication. And as we're seeing more and more of these past few years, poetry of immigration to Canada. The old country, the new country, the transition, the feelings, the regrets. And, it's a genre all to itself as far as I can tell. Savasana, corpse pose. Now, some of my yoga bunny friends say this word's actually Shivasana, but here it's Savasana. Lay flat on your back in Savasana with your eyes closed. Loosen every knotted tension in the length of your neck, in the curves of your jaw, in the tug of disbelief in your mind. Take a moment to survey your body, the brownness of your skin, the thickness of your hair. Realize that you are the only one like this in the room. Let the thought pass. Allow your breath to guide your practice, your belly rising on each inhale and sinking with each exhale. Turn your palms upward to the sky like a prayer. Pretend that your spirit recognizes the Sanskrit at the end of class. Whisper a half-hearted namaste. When you are ready, open your eyes. Namaste, my friends. Namaste, Natasha. Ink. When I tell my sister I want a tattoo, what I don't tell her, I want flowers to bloom from the corners of my body and vines to ride up and down my legs like some sort of new age poison ivy. I want moons and waves and forests. I want to be a landscape. What she tells me, you'll have to hide it. What she doesn't tell me, it is shameful to ink your body. Keep your surface plain and unaltered. Refrain from piercing dipped needles through your skin. What I tell her, smirk. Grandma has a tattoo. What I do not tell her, Grandma must have gotten her tattoo very young, younger than me, because it is faded and stretches in the folds of her skin. What she tells me, laugh. Grandma didn't have a choice. What she does not tell me, our grandmother, tender and young, must have been branded like an animal. What I don't tell my sister, maybe I am already inked, a darkness that passes beneath the skin from generation to generation. Cultural DNA, I suspect. I see a lot of that around in many tribal manifestations. Aeroplane. There is a moment just above Port of Spain where the plane dips, a rising feeling of weightlessness. Outside the window, the wing bisects the world. Above, a sliver of moon hung like a hangnail. Below, the city lights like a field of stars. Yes, the city lights like a field of stars. Thank you, Natasha. And that, I believe, is her first book. But, beliefs can often be mistaken. The Griffin Poetry Prize Anthology 2020. We've read from many of these in the past. And, there's finalists every year. And an old favorite of mine, Sharon Olds, American poet, from her book Arias, which we read from earlier in the year, but it's one of the finalists. Or is she the winner? He said, suddenly puzzled. I don't think so. There are many winners. And, these are the short lists, my mistake. But it's all good. It's all good. Hyacinth Aria. When my mother was felled by the sudden blow of a stroke, decked by a deep bleed when the old brain tumor broke through, and I flew to her and sang to her for the rest of her life, for 2 days sang her out. They told my students where I had been, and there on the seminar table was a garden, a small shoebox crate with a lattice wooden fence, inside it the spears of hyacinths. This morning I leaned over her cut glass bowl, so cut it looks about to draw blood. And there in the water, jellied with peeling bulb skin, down inside the thighs of the shoots, there was a cunning jumble of bumps, rinds, green mother grinds of hyacinths, soon to bulge, and rise, and open, and for a moment I almost mourned my mother, mourned her when she was a child, a frail being like an insect, with papery wings, with little veined skirts, before she had pummeled anyone, before she had taken the cudgel from her own mother to wield it in turn on me, who would take it in turn as my purple stylus, my gold pen. And so, for a moment, I loved my mother. She was my first chance, my last chance, to love the human. I cannot say I did not. I cannot say I did not ask to be born. I asked with my mother's beauty and her money. I asked with my father's desire for his orgasms and for my mother's money. I asked with the cradle my sister had grown out of. I asked with my mother's longing for a son. I asked with patriarchy. I asked with the milk which would well in her breasts, needing to be drained by a little living pump. I asked with my sister's hand-me-downs, lying folded. I asked with geometry, with origami, with swimming, with sewing, with what my mind would thirst to learn. Before I existed, I asked with the love of my children to exist, and with the love of their children. Did I ask with my tiny flat lungs for a long portion of breaths? Did I ask with the space in the ground like a portion of breath, where my body will rest when it is motionless, when its elements move back into the earth? I asked, with everything I did not have, to be born, and nowhere in any of it was there meaning. There was only the asking for being, and then the being, the turn taken. I want to say that love is the meaning, but I think that love may be the means. What we ask with. Now a couple of poems from Natalie Centers-Zapico. A woman shaped by the contending cultures of Mexico and the U.S. She is a la mode. A sheet cake soaked in milk and left suspended. She had no decorations, so she placed a sugar bowl on top. She placed her man at the head of the cake and told him to close his eyes and relax. Lean back, Mireille. You deserve comfort at the head of my cake. She wanted to capture the cake before it was consumed, so she called her brother-in-law and asked him to stand behind the cake for good balance. She jumped on top of the cake, folded her legs like Minnie Mouse, and told everyone to be cool. This cake was going to be in a movie. She was going to call it à la mode, and this would be the opening scene. But there's no ice cream, her man said. No, my body is the ice cream, she said, and pursed her lips for the camera until her mouth became a dark wound. Her man, who adored her again for a minute, said, You're so dumb. Clean up this kitchen already. Da asco. She waited for the hot water to run and poured a cap full of bleach in the sink. She cried, All my movies are no movies. All my movies are not mine. All my movies are not mine. We read a couple of poems from Darrell Epps' After Hours on the for part one, and yeah, it's just a great book. I want to read some more. Good reasons. People frighten me. Sunshine does too, the way it pours so inexorably through the cracks in the brickwork, the slits between the rafters. I'm always in motion. I have no choice. Mr. Capatia taught us that in grade 10 physics, when headbanger or jock was the fatal ultimatum, and we held our breath waiting for World War III. Gravity compels me. That's why I walk a mile for a shawarma at 3 a.m. Leave pennies in random mailboxes. Remake the Book of Exodus as a mythical western starring Randolph Scott. He was so battered, so resolute in Ride the High Country. With bit parts for all those lost men spurring their horses toward freedom and away from the civilized pieties of straight-A students. The important things don't get said. You store them up in an ornate antique box. Mermaids stenciled in gold, dust on the lid. The strong and the weak nuclear forces give me a headache. That's why I lied about Avatar. I'm naked, guilty, without excuse. That's why I drove all day to surprise you with peaches. That's why I kissed your clavicle so intensely. Surprise me with peaches. Poetry certainly filled with pleasant surprises and some shocking surprises too. Mind your manners, okay? Your life's all parking lots now. Friends die off and leave you holding the bag, with no way home and clown shoes on your feet. The jagged rock beat that explained everything. It's just noise, no soulmates or angels, only masked strangers and robots gone uppity. The sawtoothed palm reader talks of fame and Friday's winning horses. Artfully dodges the hows and whys. Her crystal ball throbs like a baleful enraged eye. Is this it? Is this what you were looking for when you went out looking for a pizza? Don't laugh. Sit up straight and don't forget to kiss the monkey on your way out. Great stuff, Darrell. Great stuff. I've got a weakness for wit, I think. John Steffler, and yet a poet with many books, I believe. Certainly 3 or 4 that I know of. And I found one that I rather like. As if there was lots I didn't like. Come on now. Limits. If language has learned to live in the mind, the way raccoons have learned to live in the city, maybe words can go feral again, smother in vines, the sign saying city limits, and make me dream when I think I'm awake. Come on, trees, I'm waiting to take dictation. I have no idea what you're going to say, or if it will sound anything like birdsong or boulders. Boulders? Fewer and fewer things fit in my hands. Something the size of a steer or a small car is brushing the backside of whatever I'm seeing and hearing. Like that huge carp I once felt sliding against my hand in the cold, muddy water I reached down into until my ear and cheek lay under the surface. Thanks, John. Another anthology. Well, we read from this before, but we only got to Margaret Casassos. So, Canadian poetry, best Canadian poetry. Published by Biblioasis, I think. Oh, yes, indeed it is. And edited by Marilyn Dumont. And we got a couple of good ones here. Or certainly ones that appealed to me when I was doing my due diligence. Even poets do due diligence. Even poets do due diligence. I'm beginning of a stanza there. A Room of My Own by Maureen Scott Harris, originally published in the New Quarterly. My mother had no room of her own except the one inside her. In it she stored what she chose not to talk about. No revelations escaped from it. No family stories fell from shelves to be burnished or embellished. She kept herself to herself, a private life in a private room, door firmly shut when I knocked. When I was 12 or 14, uncertain where I belonged, I asked if we could see the family tree her brother was rumoured to have. We were in the kitchen. Was she baking? Putting pin curls in my hair? I don't want to know about the sheep thieves, she said. I remember she brooked no argument when angered. Her sayings were rebukes. If you can't say something nice, don't say anything at all. Curiosity killed the cat. You made your bed, now lie in it. Lessons that can still close my throat. I learned refusal, distanced myself from family conversation, plunged into book, chose silence over speech. Here I am some 60 years later, feeling I betray her as I write. Yet I also have that room in me. It serves to keep me safe. It serves to keep people out. Salutations from the Storm. John Elizabeth Stintzi. From The Fiddlehead, originally. Sometimes I wonder if I'm really the best person for this body. Sometimes means daily. Body means cage. Person means nothing at all. Unless you count this ghost or this storm. You can see my haunt in the tired eyes, in the limbs struck like exploding oaks, as you assume you know what this body holds, which is never me, which may never be me. I'd like to see my body with someone else in it. I just want to see it happy. Oh dear. Oh yes, this is a nice one too. Natalie Lim, The Science of Holding On. Newsweek tells me that time travel might be possible if we can first locate an object with infinite density. I don't pretend to understand why, but Google infinite density anyway. Learn how the laws of physics refuse to comply in certain places, like black holes, like old memories. Could something like that live here? See the astronauts towing it home on a string, their padded hands placing it gently on a pedestal to be feared and admired, used for the greater good. We might go look at it on a Friday night, pay an entrance fee to watch the scientists make history obsolete as they shout to be heard over the mechanical drone of their progress. We've done it, they say, their faces beaming through bulletproof glass. And now we will see the future. The next morning, my local paper will report the most impressive scientific breakthrough of the 21st century, and I will flip past to the weather as I reach for a cup of coffee, reach again to hang a weight on these hands, anything to slow the ticking, keep the nectarines unripe, uneaten, not soft enough yet to bruise. I am selfish, See, everyone I love is now. I text, pray, hug, call, check the clock to make sure. Still here, still here, still here. That was published in Maisonneuve, as all the poems are here selected from various journals, and more that we'll get to another time, no question. Lawrence Hutchman's collected poems, Swimming Toward the Sun. We did one of those the other day, and we're certainly going to do more now. The forest is not a forest. In the beginning I disliked these mountains for keeping the world out. Now when I walk, I follow the timber-cut roadway, and the path becomes the poem. I see stories in the stones, poplar, maple, fir, pine, speak of something in the wind. Then the rock suddenly rises into ridges, step by step. I climb over the deposits, read the scraping on a lost school slate. Wave, vein, thrust of fire, and the wind billows through leaves like sails, jarring my mooring from the world, releasing me from prison as if something in me leaps out, a light, an abandonment to fuse with this wind. Rise on the waves of air like that raven there, and survey a landscape from above. Veering over old surveyors, lost lumber camps, old crockery and broken axes, frayed sheets of love letters, and so I would skirt the wind and rise out over the border of the river. I step into the clearing among the rocks, goldenrod and Queen Anne's lace, and in that space a task challenges me to see the power in love, to look back and view the obstacles in the road as the necessary things to come through. Here is madness, a holding on to the self, being separate from the world. Pick up that piece of rock there and throw it into the dust. Break the self and walk only here, as if someone else, as if I were that beach or that raven still riding out there. Give up the separate boundary and learn just to be the feeling, the flight of the raven, the line of the sea in the rock, or the color slowly suffusing from the season. Learn to uncover these things and step out onto the edge of that round rock where the world glimmers dangerously in its fierce purity. Here lose your name and names. Horned snail, red lantern berries, shadowy, fragrant ferns. Walk now on the path, as if the stones were allegories of a life that is not yours. Discover it as you go on in this lightness of the falling rain, where the sky touches your forehead and you feel the dreams of the dog. Go ahead, say it isn't so. The forest is not a forest. And the title poem, Swimming Toward the Sun. Excuse my dry throat. I could not stay in the cabin. Others slept while I stepped out unto the night sky. How cold and damp the air. Before me is the lake. I walk down to the rock. I think of those who died this year. The lake is dark, heavy, cloudy. There is mist on the lake, curling like grief. I sit on the beach, listen to the frogs in the large pit of the lake, singing in tenor and bass. Syncopated in time, then the loons blowing their mysterious horns to the other loons who answer them, and the phoebes who raise their little melodies, while large invisible fish splash like timpani. The sounds rise and fall in this pastoral, an orchestra in the morning mist. I swim away from the dock. The sun begins to break the horizon. I swim toward it as it sends golden rays across the waves, and two loons glide through serenity. They disappear into the light as I swim through. As you can see, Lawrence is very much a nature poet, and that pleases me greatly. But many personal ones too. And although there are many homages and nods to other contemporary poets in Personal Encounters book, in Reading the Water, there is this one, Fred Cogswell. And I imagine some of you will not know that name. You'll likely have to be about my age to recognize the halo around Fred Cogswell. And do your own research, you'll find him. A nod and a tip of the hat to Mr. Cogswell. When I see you lying abed, the bruises on your arms, I'm aware of the resilience of your body, the strong light in your eyes, those fingers with the strength of a farm boy that have written so many books. You loved sports, running 2 miles back to school to play baseball after dinner, sinking a basket in that championship game. Your grandmother from Boutouche instilled the love of French in you. You loved to chase butterflies, devoured the Old Testament and the New Testament, the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, any novel you could get your hands on, then poetry, which became your life. You came from Centreville, made it larger, like the eagles that glide over the St. John Valley, tracing ever farther flights. When you wrote, how carefully you painted the portraits of the villagers, like an old Dutch master faithful to their character. The philosophy in your poems was one that does not divide the world into separate things, but reveals life as darkness and light, the crescent of the moon and the corona of the sun. Now in your last struggle, you follow the path from the farmhouse through the apple orchard down by the cedars and the creek, out toward the big rock pile under the tree, where you can see beyond the circumference of the mountains. The book ends with these 2 poems. Eva in the Duinoord Hotel. Sounds very Dutch to me. Anything with 2 O's in it's usually Dutch. Duinoord. This photo becomes a Vermeer painting. You are placed carefully against the light, which peeks through the window in a blurred green tone. The world is framed. The tablecloth is spreading the light as so evenly, folded with shadows. The silver curved glasses form the air. You sit before me in this black veiled dress and look into me, lady of my heart. In the forest. I was standing at the beginning of an enchanted forest, textures and leaves composed like a tapestry. The path seemed to rise through the trees into the sky. I had to take this path as a spiritual adventure. Suddenly I saw a woman at my side, wearing a white dress. She had radiance about her. The light fell on her. It seemed the light was raining on her. We were destined to take this path together. She stood there waiting. Swimming towards the sun. A fine ambition. I'm a little wary of the sun myself. I burn very quickly and have to stay out of it. But maybe he's using the sun as a metaphor. Anyway, so long, friends. Poetry Show. Love.